Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. My week has been rather shit, but at least my reading was very good. So this reading week goes from December 7th through December 11th. I started the reading week with a chunk of Belle redeeming Inventing the Renaissance by Ada Palmer. So, Inventing the Renaissance is in part a history of mostly Florence from 12 something through to not quite 1600. And it's also about why this period in history, or the events that took place in this period, are sexy to generations of later scholars. And also, this book is about being cautious about the received narratives, particularly from those generations of scholars who find this period sexy and have made up so many myths about this period. Hence the subtitle, The Myth of a Golden Age. The book is comprised of a number of parts. The first part looks at the various X factors that make this period of history sexy to generations of scholars. The second part is Ada Palmer's Renaissance. And the third part is brief biographical sketches of people that Ada Palmer finds interesting. I have not yet got to the later parts of this book. So I have had 3 goes at this book so far. So the first go was shortly after I bought the book and got it in the mail, and I bailed at the introduction. Too much Machiavelli, I think. The second time I went at the book, I managed to get to chapter chapter 24, Studio Humanitatis, the words that sting and bite. Although, as I was beginning the Belle Redemption, I'm thinking, I bailed at chapter 23, the Humanista's rival scholasticism. No, I actually read that chapter, and it was 24 that I bailed on. But I forgot about that until I actually started reading chapter 23, so I started this new Belle Redemption at chapter 23. But back to Belle Redemption, bailing number 2. So, by this point, that chapter 24 is well into Ada Palmer's Renaissance. And so, she specializes in the history of ideas. And a lot of the history that she's focusing on is the history of ideas in this period, which ended up around chapters 21, 22, 23, 24, was rather repetitive and boring. I'm not interested in what she's interested in. And while Palmer does use a lot of irreverent techniques and a really jocular sort of narrative style, it doesn't really cover up the fact that, I'm bored. So I ended up bailing on the book at that time, and then decided to revisit it for Belle Redemption December. So I started off on chapter 23 and read a good chunk of the book into part 3, which is the biographical sketches. So I'm currently sitting at chapter 39. And I will start that on Sunday. So, after a few months away from this book, I quickly got back into the gist of things. And I enjoyed what I read. I certainly didn't love it. I did find myself gradually becoming bored again towards the end of last Sunday's reading period. So I think I'm going to approach inventing the Renaissance basically in a very slow way. I'm going to read a good chunk of this book on Sunday, and then maybe another chunk or two the next Sunday or so, depending on however many Sundays I need to finish this book off. I do not think this book is going to be anything resembling a favorite of mine. It's a book that I read, but I don't think I'm going to particularly enjoy it. And I don't think I will be returning to it once I finally finish it. But we shall see. Other readers have enjoyed it significantly more than I am. Anyway, let's move on to the fiction. So, the two works of fiction that I read this week are associated with Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. So, in September, as part of Shorty September, there was an event, or there was a prompt where you read a book and kind of do a research project on that. And I thought it would be cool to reread Mrs. Dalloway after about 18 or so years, and then reread The Hours by Michael Cunningham after 20 plus years, and also see how reading Mrs. Dalloway and then The Hours compares to reading The Hours and then Mrs. Dalloway, which is ultimately how I actually ended up doing it. And then read Theory and Practice by Michelle de Kretser, which also features Virginia Woolf as a major figure in the book. So, anyway, in September, things didn't quite go well because I ended up bailing on Mrs. Dalloway, so I held off on The Hours until Bail Redemption December, because I did successfully bail redeem Mrs. Dalloway last week. And very happy about that. I really enjoyed rereading it. So, The Hours by Michael Cunningham is about three women. Going in chronological order, the novel begins with the suicide of Virginia Woolf. However, the bulk of her story in this novel is set during a day in 1923 while she is beginning the work of writing what would eventually become Mrs. Dalloway. And she's trying to convince her husband that she's well enough to return to London. The second section is about a 1940s housewife named Laura, who is reading Mrs. Dalloway and is trying to prepare for her husband's birthday while both loving and secretly barely tolerating her 3-year-old son. And she's feeling, well, and she's unsatisfied with her life. And she feels conflicted because she should be satisfied with her life, but she's really not. The third section and the longest section of the book or sections, is set in the 1990s and is about a middle-aged woman named Clarissa Vaughn, who is a retelling, and her story is basically a retelling of Mrs. Dalloway. So Clarissa is preparing a party for her best friend Richard, who is being given a literary award. Richard is dying of AIDS, and he's starting that fatal decline. And so Clarissa's day very much mirrors Mrs. Dalloway in a lot of ways. So the departure for this version of Mrs. Dalloway, which is Richard's pet name for Clarissa, is that in Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa ultimately marries Richard Dalloway, who would become a politician. In the hours, going back to Mrs. Dalloway, but throughout much of the book, she's also wondering what would have happened, what would my life be like if I had married Peter Welsh, another young man who was courting me at the time. And further back in her mind is her relationship with a young woman named Sally Seaton. In the hours, Clarissa is in a long-term relationship with Sally, although Sally is very much Richard Dalloway. And Peter is in part Richard in this scenario, and also Septimus from the hours. From Mrs. Dalloway. And so a lot of the novel, particularly on Clarissa's part, is wondering what might have been had things been different during her own teenage summer at a vacation home owned by a friend named Lewis, which kind of informs a lot of what's going on in the novel. So I really enjoyed this reread. It was a lot of fun. I started it on Monday and read 121 pages, which left me about a little more than 100 for Tuesday to finish it off, and I had a blast. I really enjoyed rereading The Hours. And then on Wednesday, I moved on to Theory and Practice by Michelle de Kretser. So this is about a graduate student in Sydney who not Sydney, she's in Melbourne. She would grow up to be a novelist. And the very beginning of the novel is the narrator trying to write the beginning of a novel, which doesn't quite work out. So much of the rest of the story is a flashback to her first year or so of graduate school while she's doing a dissertation on Virginia Woolf's later novels. While she's working on this dissertation, she also gets involved with a young man named Kit who is seeing someone else. And over the course of the novel, the narrator discovers that Virginia Woolf was a racist. And she spends some of the book trying to grapple with that revelation and what that means to her. And also her relationship with Kit. And so the idea of this novel is how theory, feminism, and Marxism fall apart in practice. Virginia Woolf is a major figure in literary feminism, particularly in this period. And kind of that failure of that sort of realizing that she's racist, she's anti-Semitic, how that affects her presence in theory as a paragon of feminism, as well as how the main character and a lot of other women in the novel themselves kind of call themselves feminists, and yet a lot of what they do sort of fails feminism in practice, if that makes any sense. I really enjoyed the novel quite a bit. I tried to read it earlier this year in September, and I don't know why I bailed on it, because I really enjoyed it. It does sort of fall apart in a way at the end. There's a time leap from sort of the mid 80s to the late 90s and then 2010s or 2000s. And I'm not entirely sure that quite works out. And Virginia Woolf kind of fades out as the main focus is on the relationship. But I did really enjoy this book. And finally, I returned to my third or fourth Bell redemption attempt of Homeland of My Body, New and Selected Poems by Richard Blanco. So, I have struggled with this collection for months now. And I'm happy to say that I think I've finally gotten over the hump. I am about to start looking for the Gulf Motel. So this collection is divided into new poems which bookend the selected section, which goes chronologically. So I'm very happy with how things are turning out with Homeland of My Body, although I won't be continuing with this collection today. My plan for this coming reading week is today and Saturday I'm going to try to knock off the drama bales. So today I'm going to read The Skin of Our Teeth by Thornton Wilder, which is a very weird play. And then on Saturday I will try to reread Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. This is about an African-American family in Chicago who hope that a life insurance payout will change their lives. And Ma Rainey's Black Bottom by August Wilson, which is about a recording session that goes terribly wrong. On Sunday, I will be returning to Inventing the Renaissance and report back on how far I get. And hoping that Machiavelli does not drive me away again. Then on Monday, I will try to redeem Open Heaven by Sean Hewitt. This is about a gay man who reminisces about his first love. And if I have more time, I will then finish off Homeland of My Body by Richard Blanco. And if I have even more time, Paris Stories by Mavis Gallant, and then that should get me to Saturday. So that will be for the following weekly reads. So anyway, so that's my reading week. It turned out pretty good, even if I did not probably explain myself all that well in this wrap-up. So as far as BookTube videos next week go, I want to probably will make a video talking about the frustrating failed discussion videos that I would like to have made over the course of the year. Which includes the 2 quasi-tags that I haven't gotten around to yet, although I might still try to do them. But it is incredibly difficult for me to come up with my top 10 favorite book-to-film adaptations for some odd reason. And also, I want to talk about my manga plans for 2026 and any other videos that strike my fancy. But for now, I'm done. I'm going to go ahead and finish this video. Go put these three back on the shelves. And get ready for the rest of my day. So until I see you on Monday BookTube, thank you. Have a great afternoon and have a great weekend. Stay safe.